Safety is not something we talk about much in Singapore, except to say Singapore is so safe. And it's true. I've walked home at 2 a.m. many times, taken my dog down for a late night pee, and always felt completely safe. We like to believe that the battle is won, that the fight is over. But the reality is safety is no longer just about the physical world. It's no longer only about physical abuse or visible pain. Safety today includes digital spaces too. And here in Singapore, one of the most digitized countries in the world, with a 96.9% internet penetration rate, violence has taken on another form. It may not bruise the skin or abuse the body, but it still seems to violate the soul. Welcome to the Brown Box. Our guest today is Nisha Rai. Nisha is an intersectional feminist and an advocate for safer and more inclusive spaces here in Singapore. I met Nisha a few years ago while working on a PSA about TFSV, Technology Facilitated Sexual Violence. The name is self-explanatory. It includes things like non-consensual image sharing, deepfakes, revenge porn, and digital stalking, abuse that happens using technology. This conversation is a continuation of that research I did for that film. It's a conversation about allyship. In Nisha's case, male allyship. It's about choosing to be an activist, even when the people around you, including your family, may not fully understand what you're fighting for. And it's a story that feels especially urgent here in tech-savvy Singapore, where cybercrime isn't just about scams. It's also about the trade, the manipulation, and the violation of women's images online. And before you click away, before you say, this isn't a conversation that affects me, listen to what Nisha says here.
I always share this, and it's something that blows people's minds away because they're just like, what? The youngest that I've seen being violated in the pages was a 3-month baby. And the oldest that I've seen being violated on the pages as well is a 60 or 70-year-old lady, probably in her 60s.
Let's start at the beginning, when this issue really came into the spotlight in Singapore. In 2018, a Telegram group called SG Nasi Lemak was created. It quickly grew to over 44,000 members. The group was known for sharing hidden camera videos and non-consensual explicit images of women. Members had to stay active by uploading pornographic content themselves. After multiple complaints, the police raided the group in 2019. 4 men were arrested and charged, but shutting it down didn't stop the problem. Over 50 similar groups surfaced soon after. These channels started operating almost like a Netflix subscription, offering users image packages based on race, age, even specific school uniforms. And just like in the real world, the abuse was often personal. Over 80% of the abusers were known to the victim. And the blame? That hasn't changed. Online or offline, it sounds the same. In the physical world, we're told, why did you wear that? Why did you go there? Why were you out so late? What did you expect? Now it's, why did you post that? Why did you post yourself wearing that? You should have known better. The setting has changed, but the shame, the judgment, and the burden on women remains exactly the same. It was one of these groups that Nisha stepped into, not as a victim, but as a whistleblower. She joined to name and shame the users.
What happened was there was somebody who actually voiced out that their Instagram picture, not even anything personal or private, was actually out in these groups. And I was like, that's insane. At that point in time, there was a bit of a lower barrier to entry to enter the groups. And you could just find it on Telegram. It was very straightforward. In that group, you would see things such as revenge porn kind of scenarios. And it's usually angled shots where the victim survivor wouldn't even know that it's being taken of them. There are also instances of direct videos that are being taken, which probably it's on the consent of the partners. But again, the consent of the partners should only be to the two, not to the entire internet. That's where, again, boundaries are violated, of course. Then there are instances of deepfake, which means that it could just be a simple Instagram picture. They use digital tools, your AI and stuff, and they just put boobs and ass and everything into it. And it's just plastering like the face to a naked body, for instance. Or you have child pornography. That was something that I stumbled upon. You just have simple, innocent pictures of maybe girls in their school uniforms, and just taking a fun shot together, or like TikTok videos, Instagram reels. So you would see all of these in the groups. And these are things that you would commonly see in the more mainstream groups. As I went deeper and deeper, I saw a lot more depraved things. I always share this, and it's something that blows people's minds away, because they're just like, what? The youngest that I've seen being violated in the pages was a 3-month baby. And the oldest that I've seen being violated on the pages as well is a 60 or 70-year-old lady, probably in her 60s. So the range is big, and the narrative of constantly saying, oh, but a child is there, a baby is there, a much older lady is there. No, it doesn't matter who is there. The point is that it shouldn't be happening to someone who's 3 months old. It shouldn't be happening to 60. It shouldn't be happening to anybody, period. I was seeing things like that day in, day out, because I was making the effort to report them, to reach out to authorities, to make police reports on them, to reach out to wherever I could internationally, or perhaps even like news outlets and news channels to help. And they were actively doing things on their end to really reach out. So that was always something I was very grateful for. And I think it was especially that period where it became a rude awakening to everybody. Oh my God, violations also happen online. These are the things that I was seeing day in, day out. And it really angered me, because one, it shouldn't even be happening. And two, there are so much of things that are happening in today's age: advocacy, awareness, victim survivor support, perpetrator accountability, rehabilitation. All of this are happening.
And also under the narrative of Singapore being such a safe
Yeah.
place. The global, anywhere you
Exactly.
go in the globe, people will be like, oh, you're from Singapore, it's so safe.
Yeah, we are very grateful that if you can leave the streets at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., you can come back home, knock wood, you're safe and stuff like that. But people don't realize that safety is such a huge thing. And in today's age, safety is also in the digital aspect, in the online world. When I was much younger, I used to always say Singapore is very safe. Nothing much will happen to you here. As I get older, I realize that, oh my God, actually, the definition of safety is it's really huge.
As I mentioned in the intro, I first met Nisha while working on a PSA about TFSV, Technology Facilitated Sexual Violence. We profiled one of these stories.
It was Valentine's Day. All dressed up and feeling good. I wanted to hold on to this perfect moment. I clicked, shared, and left for my night out. But that photo, it changed everything. I learned from a friend that my innocent selfie had been shared on a chat platform, ogled by strangers I'd never met, anonymous names hiding behind screens. I felt violated, though no one touched me.
And of course, Nisha as well.
Consent should be sacred, both online and offline. If you're a victim of IBSA, you are not at fault. And remember, you are not alone. Seek support through counseling, legal action, or by reporting directly on social media and messaging platforms. And if you witness abuse, be an active bystander by reporting it, speaking up, and support the victim survivor.
While researching the film, I found myself drawn to Nisha's story. How does an Indian girl at such a young age decide that this is the fight she wants to take on, that this will be her life's work? So as always, we go back to the beginning, looking for answers.
I've always had a very close-knit relationship with my eldest brother, simply because he's the one who brought me up. So a bit of context of like family-wise is that my eldest brother is 11 years older than me. My second brother is 2 years older than me. So you can imagine he automatically takes up the role as like a second parent almost. And plus my parents are first gen. My dad was born in Singapore, went back to India, and then came back to Singapore for national service. Whereas my mom was always in India, came to Singapore with my dad after he finished his national service. And my grandfather was here like, I don't know, in the 40s, almost in the 40s, 50s, went back and then came back in the 60s and stuff. So yeah, so that's a bit of a background. And my parents were not very literate when it came to understanding the schooling system, the way things worked and stuff. But the two of them really just did whatever they could to navigate, to really understand.
What jobs were they in?
So my mom's a housewife. My dad is a contract driver. So he used to do that all his life. Driving has been his profession. My parents really just navigated the system somehow, somewhat, somewhere. And fun fact is that, for example, for my mom, she may not be fluent in English, but she's fluent in Malay. So she picked up the language from our neighbors and stuff, and my dad's fluent in all the other languages, like Chinese, Hokkien, Malay, Tamil. He's fluent in all of that. I think the two of them are very street smart, which is something that has, I guess, flown to all three of us. My eldest brother became like the first figure at home who was going through the system A to Z. He just picked up things very quickly. And by the time my second brother and I were around, he was able to just navigate things. I guess my second brother was a quick trial run for the 2 years. And then there was me. And then he was like, yeah, pretty much at this point in time, I get the system. Since then, my eldest brother has always played a very monumental role in raising the two of us. So from academics to personal life, to being our friend, to being our coach, to being the parent, to being everything. I think that is something that he has always been. And for me, I always refer to him as a parent, less of a brother, more of a parent. Oddly enough, he was the one who drove me to be a feminist. And that is something that I would always rehash and reiterate whenever I'm speaking to somebody, especially when it comes to the concept of allyship, when it comes to the sense of equity. That's always something I would bring across. And when it comes to my second brother, because we're so close in age, I guess we experience things almost similarly, except in the aspect of gender. And my second brother takes a conscious effort to learn. So for him, whenever he sees something that is not right, that is not appropriate, or he's like, why is this a woman's issue? Why is it not a general issue? He asks us those questions. And for me, it's always something enlightening for me, because sometimes I would see it in my lens without seeing it in his lens. I guess the male presence in my life has been like a boon and a bane. I think the blessing is because I have such strong allies this close to me. But I guess the bane is when I look at the grand scheme of things or the broader scenario and I realize that, yeah, not a lot of people are allies, or not a lot of people, especially like maybe the men, may not resonate entirely with the things I do, because I may seem like a raging feminist, or I may seem like a man-hater, when all I'm striving for is equity for every gender. I think the most distinct memory would be when I was 8 years old and I wanted to join martial arts. At that point in time, when I was joining the martial arts class, there were no females in the class. So I was actually the first female who joined the class. I remember there was a bit of a upheaval, uproar, like, why is she as a girl going for martial art classes? She needs to learn things that are a bit more dainty in nature, a bit more girly in nature. And my eldest brother, he said, I don't care what you feel, that's your problem. My girl will do whatever she wants to do, even if it means being in martial arts. And if she wants to randomly go dainty and do everything else, that's fine. Like, I took dancing classes as well, so I'm not sure why is it conveniently undainty of me to be taking martial arts. And yeah, and my eldest brothers funded my martial arts class. I was 8 years old, he was 19. He said, you know what, I will fund it because I believe she should be taking this up, not because she needs to be the biggest fighter there is in the room, but because she needs to know how to protect herself. I can't be always there to protect her, so she needs to know how to protect herself. So I guess for him, it was always giving me that independence in terms of trying things that I wanted to try. And more importantly, giving me that voice, or being my voice when I perhaps couldn't put words. So I guess that most distinct memory of my brother being an ally, I never looked at it as a boy-girl thing. I was always looking at it as what's wrong with everybody doing something that they want to do? When I was much younger, I didn't see that boy and girl scenario. I saw it as more of, what is the issue, or what's the matter of me doing something that I love? And constantly hearing feedback and things such as, she's doing something that's very boy-like, or she's dressing up like a boy, like that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, it's just clothes. Why does it matter to you what I wear? I guess at that point in time, it was just me seeing it as a collective without thinking that actually gender plays a role. But as I got older and I started to recollect things, I realized that, wait a minute, all of that was actually gendered. The realization kicked in quite later in life. When I was maybe around 18 was when I've had a lot of things hit me and I was like, oh my God, all of this are actually rooted in patriarchy. But that was a much later realization.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's quite a privilege, because I remember exactly when I realized I was a girl. I tell Nisha a story which I've shared before on this podcast about visiting my grandparents' place, a small village in Tamil Nadu. I loved those visits, running wild in the heat, wearing shorts and vests, bathing under the water pumps that watered the rice fields, sitting on jute beds in the late afternoon, reading, drinking chai, playing cards with my uncles. And then one holiday, I got my period, and everything stopped. Suddenly what I wore, where I sat, who I played with, all of it became a matter of opinion. And that's when I realized things are different for girls. I asked Nisha about being the first female graduate in her family.
When I say first female graduate, it's really because I'm in a privileged scenario, in a privileged situation in Singapore. And if the roles were reversed and maybe I was elsewhere, maybe I wouldn't be. I think that is something that I always remember and rehash. Bit of a context is that my father's side is very male dominated, so there's a lot of males in the household. And my mother's side, it's a fair mix of male and females. And majority of my family's in India. There's only like maybe one or two other relatives in Singapore. A lot of them, by the time they finished school, they were already married, which means they were already married at 21, 22. And For me, I'm just like, oh my God, at 21, I'm still a child. How can someone get married at 21 when for me, I'm still navigating life and I'm not even sure where I'm going the next day or what I'm eating the next day. And for somebody to take such a big step of marriage, for me, that was always very bizarre. So I would say that I got very privileged to be in Singapore. But I think it really reminded me of how much of injustice there is, because there shouldn't be any reason why I'm the first female graduate. There's no reason why that I should be the first female graduate who perhaps is able to pursue her passion, profession, and everything. And everyone else, by the time they graduate, they're off married or they're having kids and stuff. If that is somebody's choice where they can do it, that's completely fine. But for most instances, it's not really a choice. It's just the way that life is supposedly structured, where by a certain age, you need to get married. Especially like in the context of India, it's a structure. That is something that further propels me and motivates me to work harder or to see how is it that I can bring the impact across, which means be it in a national landscape, an international landscape, or even in my simple day-to-day conversations. How can I empower the women around me? Actually, no, I want to take that back. Not empower the women around me, but rather support the women around me, because I think everybody's empowerment journey is different and I cannot be the savior. But what I can do is support the choices that they want to make for themselves and stand there for them, because again, I'm in that privileged scenario and situation that I can stand for them.
I need to pause here as I edit and do the math on Nisha's story. Her family is from Uttar Pradesh, one of India's most patriarchal states. Her father was a contract driver, her mother a traditional housewife, and yet here she is, a graduate, an advocate for gender equality. It's a massive leap. I asked Nisha, what about the women in her life? Who inspired her?
I guess my relationship with my mother, it's really evolved over the years, because it's her first time being a mother to a daughter. As much as it's my first time being a daughter to a mother, both of us came from very different scenarios. She actually came from a very empowering household. So her father was always very empowering. She came from a household where the siblings, her mother, they were always striving her to be independent, to do what her choice was, to do what she liked. And she did get married very early. She got married at 16. She came from a very supportive household. I think coming to Singapore, obviously, she brought back a lot of the culture back to Singapore. So a lot of things that they still do in India, she does it here for majority part of things. I wouldn't even say most, I would say majority. I guess growing up from my mother, she wanted me a bit more dainty, a bit more feminine. And I had phases, the usual phases that most girls would have. It's that tomboy phase for a bit, and then suddenly you're a rebel, and then suddenly, oh my God, I love pink. I guess growing up, my way to fight the patriarchy was to be very tomboyish. Then later on, I realized, wait a minute, I don't have to be like that to fight the patriarchy. I can be who I want to be. When I was a kid, like my eldest brother would tell me, I loved pink. I had pink head to toe. Everything was pink about me. So I guess I'm back in that stage, which I love. No complaints there. But I would say, I think firstly, in the aspect of like my mother, she really learned a lot with me. So a lot of times when I was growing older and stuff, she wouldn't understand things. She'd be like, why are you doing this? It doesn't make sense. Girls shouldn't be doing this and stuff. And I would have the conversations. What do you mean girls shouldn't be doing this? What do you mean it's only for girls to do and it doesn't matter for boys? Or as simple things and be like, no, you sit down. You don't have to be doing this. I would say she has taken a lot more initiative and a lot more openness to learn now as opposed to last time. I think that is something that I've always been very grateful for, especially in the past few years, at least with my mother. I think even in terms of broader influences of things, I would say it's less of direct mentors or direct female figures, but more of observing female figures in my life. I had certain relatives and stuff who were doing pretty amazing jobs in male-dominated spaces. And I would look at them and observe them and I'm like, oh my God, that is so cool. I want to be that someday. Now being the non-profit space, I have a lot of female figures around me, my peers who are around me, my managers, my direct mentors and stuff, or basically, the women in my space right now have always encouraged me to be a better person. Less of a better woman, but more of a better person, because they give me lens and perspectives on things that I otherwise wouldn't think of. Or more importantly, I don't feel alone in the journey. Like when I speak about something that very crazily happened to me as a kid and it's gender related, they're like, yeah, that's something that we all went through and we're all breaking that mold together. And it doesn't make me feel crazy. Sometimes I feel I shared an experience, and especially as a brown woman, I would share an experience and it would be very tough for some people to relate. And then I meet women in the community or like my women in the community or in my circles and they're like, no, I experienced that too. And I was like, oh my God, so it's not just me and I don't feel alone, which again, it sucks because I don't want anybody to be going through that. But at the same time, it's refreshing to know that I guess we are all in that fight to break the mold and to break the space or the glass ceiling or bamboo ceiling, depending how you want to call it.
It's interesting and kind of sweet that when Nisha talks about her mother, Feminism shows up in wardrobe choices, in the internal tug of war between choosing to be dainty and girlish or being a tomboy, in the pushback against what girls should or shouldn't wear or do. But when she speaks of the women around her now, mentors, peers, community, it's more about the bamboo ceiling, the power structures. What really stays with me is that the fight for equal rights for women, it's everywhere. It's in boardrooms, at those tables where we're told that we should lean in interviews where we're taught to have the confidence of a white man. But it's also in our shopping carts, in our wardrobes, in something as small as the internal dialogue around the choice to wear pink or not wear pink. I asked Nisha, when did she know that advocating for gender equality would be her lifelong mission?
I think firstly, when I hit that realization age when I was in university, I think I did remember taking quite a bit of time to actually just go back and analyze things that have happened, be it to me or to those around me, or reading through experiences, literature, lived experiences especially. It made me think and realize that, oh my gosh, we need more voices, we need more representation, and more importantly, we need more supporters in the space. At that point in time, I was already like in Students for a Safer NUS, which was an initiative, like a ground-up initiative, really to tackle sexual misconduct on campus and to provide victim survivors with a support space. I remember when the cases started coming up, and I guess when I started seeing the cases coming up, that angered me the first run. What made me realize was that, oh my God, this space needs a lot of support work, was because I constantly saw the narrative of holding the perpetrators accountable, and everybody were doing their best effort to hunt down the perpetrators, to hold them accountable. Everybody were doing that, which was fantastic. And of course, you have the usual naysayers and victim blamers, which are obviously pissing me off, and you have that group. But I realized that when it came to the bystander intervention, particularly when it came to supporting the victim survivors, I wasn't seeing that as much. I think that was what got me into this space, because I was like, we are focusing on everything else, which is fantastic. We are holding the perpetrators accountable. We are calling people out for the crap that they say online, but we are not supporting people who are actually going through it. Nobody is hearing them out. So I decided to use that as a way to actually reach out to them individually and to talk to them to see how they're doing, and to have more conversations within my circle as well, to be like, hey, this is going on. Can I check? Has this happened to you before? Then that was when everybody started having a bit more candid sharings and saying that this has happened, or I faced this with a person, with like an ex-partner, or with somebody that I was seeing for a while and stuff like that. It made me realize that, oh my gosh, this is actually more prevalent than one would think it is. I think for me, my advocacy work was very driven on bystander intervention, and bystander intervention in the sense of victim survivor support, where we go through a non-judgmental and empathetic approach when it comes to supporting them and guiding them. And more importantly, at the bystander intervention level, how is it that you can support these victim survivors? So I guess my advocacy work was very driven on that, essentially, where there was a sense of more trauma-informed care, which spaces like AWARE and She/Her Empowerment are fantastic in. Then you have the bystander intervention work, which is something like the Organization of United Women Singapore. We do that a lot.
As I edit this, what makes Nisha's story stand out to me is that she isn't a survivor herself. She didn't come to this work through personal trauma. She came through listening, observing, noticing. It takes a kind of rare empathy to feel someone else's pain deeply enough to make it your mission. And I find that deeply inspiring. In what might be seen as a very Singaporean approach, swift, efficient, focused on catching the perpetrator and moving on, Nisha did something different. She turned to the survivors and asked, "How are you doing?" Her advocacy, yes, it began with outrage, but her mission, it began with care. And that, I think, is a very powerful way to start a not-so-quiet revolution.
I think university was where the realization for me was that I wanted to be involved in a lot more groundwork and grassroots level, because I know in the long run, I do want to do something that's a bit more impactful, a bit more strategic, a bit more in the policy part of things, or something along those lines. I think in the third year, which means a year plus into my advocacy work, that I was like, if I want to do the work that I've been doing, maybe a nonprofit for now would be a good idea. And that was why I decided to go into the nonprofit space. And being a nonprofit space, I could focus on women's empowerment. I could focus on youth empowerment, because that's also an area that's very close to me in terms of youth empowerment aspect. Because again, essentially youth are the future of the world. So that's also something that matters to me. I have a day job and I have an evening job. So like my day job is United Women Singapore and we focus a lot on STEM there. And my evening job is an internship at Singapore Council, so a women's organization where I focus a lot on initiatives that essentially focuses a lot on having senior leadership, or senior women in leadership positions to go into their board journeys and then to serve on boards. So my work, I guess, allows for me to look at a very wide range of things. I work with kids as young as 6, or I work with senior women or men who are as old as maybe in their 60s, even in their 70s. Having that huge range really lets me to look at things at the front and back. I learn so much from them. I think that they learn less from me and I learn a lot more from them because they give me perspectives on things that I otherwise wouldn't think of. Or maybe if I'm very fueled with rage in that moment at the patriarchy or in other structures and scenarios, they give me a different lens of things and I'm like, I didn't think about it that way. Or even when it comes to perhaps running programs and stuff, and a lot of times I'm again very grateful that the people that I work with and the people who are around me always encourage me to just sit in, listen, learn, ask, and to always put me in discussions. And I think that is something that has really shaped and helped me shape my journey a lot and really further motivates me and encourages me to stay in this space. I want to be in the women's empowerment space till my last breath. Everything else, it's fine, but this is the things that I know I want to do till my last breath. In the best case scenario, I don't want to be doing this because it means that we would have reached equity. We all know with the statistics and the research and stuff, it shows that it's going to be much, much later where equity is achieved. And I think that's more the reason why that I obviously have to do this till my last breath, but I hope not to do it because I would want equity to come much sooner, but it's a far-fetched reality.
Until my last breath. That's what Nisha says about her commitment to women's empowerment. And that's no small thing. There's something so powerful in how certain she is. I'm quite curious about one specific part of her work, this focus on getting girls into STEM. Why STEM?
UWS, we did this research and it showed that at a much younger age, a lot of girls are very encouraged to join the STEM space. They're always very interested in the space and stuff like that. But as they get older, the confidence kind of dwindles a little when it comes to joining the STEM space because they feel it's a male-dominated space or they may not have the caliber to do it and they may not have the competence. I think that is extremely false because they are very competent. They have very strong calibers. So I guess it's a bit more of a confidence issue. This was something that I remembered. I was speaking to somebody and I was asking them about imposter syndrome and stuff because sometimes I do go through that and I'm like, oh my God, what if I'm like not as good as I think I am? I remember someone clearly telling me this to my face. Do you ever hear a man say that? And I was like, no. And they're like, exactly. Because men, it doesn't matter whether they have competence or no competence. They will go ahead and do it. So if they can do that, why can't you? And I was like, you know what? You are right. And I think that is something that I learned and I internalized and I intentionally share that with the people younger than me. Exposure matters a lot. Sustained exposure and a sustained encouragement matters a lot because that's really what's going to drive them to be in the space. If I like what the work that they do, be it in AI and robotics or simply being an electrical engineer, for instance, there's no reason why they can't do it.
I do a bit more research on this, and yes, STEM has become one of the most visible battlegrounds for gender bias in careers. For a long time, STEM came with unspoken message. Engineering is for men, physics for men, computer science for men. It's about who's seen as a good fit, who's expected to understand how numbers work, how things work. Meanwhile, girls are nudged constantly towards so-called softer fields, teaching, admin, nursing. And here's the thing, STEM isn't just a career path, any career path. It's high growth, it's high paying, it's global. It offers you the tools to solve real problems and a chance to travel the world while you're doing it. So when we fight to get girls into STEM, we're not just fighting for jobs. We're fighting the idea that some spaces just belong to men. Now I asked Nisha about an incident that she mentioned earlier, a reminder that no matter how many steps we take forward, sometimes it feels like we haven't even moved from the starting line.
We were having the usual interactions and stuff, and one of the girls who was much younger said that something that she's heard at the age of 6 or 7 is that simple things like girls are not good at math, but I think one of the girls said something along the lines of women belong in kitchens. And I'm like, why? I'm like, you're 6. Why do you feel that way? And then you speak to women who are 16 and you hear that. At my age, I hear that as well. Women who are older also hear that as well. And that's also something that we stereotypically see, where all the men are out eating and it's all the women who are slogging in the kitchen. And that's a narrative. When you think about kitchen, you think about women. And again, that shouldn't be the case or the scenario. But in most households, especially maybe in South Asian households, it's very common to see that. That struck me and I was like, oh my God, we are in 2025. Why is a 6-year-old saying this to me? But this is something that when I was 6, I heard it. Or more importantly, when I was 4, 5, 6, when I was a kid, I would constantly see my mother and my aunties in the kitchen cooking while all the men are out eating and asking for this, asking for that. That's something that frustrates me. It's my pet peeve in today's time and age. Every time I see that happening, I'm like, I have this sense of pent-up frustration that I would see.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
It's even the concept of hot roti.
Yeah.
That means somebody's in the kitchen.
Exactly. That's what frustrates me sometimes. I'm just like, no, that's a very strong pet peeve I have. To hear someone so young say that to me, I was like, why are you saying that to me?
As you can probably hear in my voice, women in the kitchen, only women in the kitchen, is a pet peeve of mine too. We continue our discussion talking about DEI and then moving on to the topic of the impact of design on women and female spaces.
I always love to talk about the example of a toilet. You can tell when a toilet is built by a man versus by a woman. If it's a toilet built by a man, your pad would be on the floor because there's no way that there's any balancing ground for the pad to be on the table, or your makeup items or things that you're using, for instance, like creams and stuff or whatsoever, any items that you have. Whereas when it's a toilet built by a woman, those kind of things are placed in considerations. I went to one of my friend's house and she was the one who designed her whole house basically. And she's like, I did this and that because I want to have my pads here. I want to put my makeup there. I want to put some of my jewelry and my outfits here. I want to put some of my sports gears here. I want to put my things here. And I was like, oh my God, it's a very big difference. And then I compare it to elsewhere and I'm like, oh my God, that's a very huge difference. Even having conversations with some peers who might be disabled and they would say that, yeah, I can't go to this toilet because it's inconvenient for me, or this mall may not be convenient for me because there's not a lot of wheelchair-friendly space. And then I was like, wow, and that's something I don't think about. And that's why I say D&I is so important, because it drives for implementation to be inclusive. And that's the whole point of it.
I asked Nisha why she thinks change in a modern, connected, westernized country like Singapore has been so hard and taken so long.
The government does a lot of fireside chats, discussions, breakout discussions, focus group discussions, and a lot of times they have this tripartite kind of thing where you have the public, private, and people coming in to speak. So I guess definitely that lens of things is fantastic, and the government using that as a constant approach when it comes to understanding societal issues. Where is it that one may require intervention, support? How can intervention and support be given? I think that's fantastic. But I think also the problem with this space is that it's a lot of times the people who are already in the space for very long are usually the ones who are in those spaces, or those who love being in that space volunteer to be there all the time. And after a while, it becomes repetitive voices. And because of the repetitive voices, you don't really hear what's the main issue at hand, simply because the people who are having the main issue at hand have a lot more things to worry about than to be there. Like, for instance, if let's say I were to maybe give in a scenario of a caregiver, maybe that caregiver has a lot of responsibilities and they don't have the time to be there in that focus group discussion. They don't have the time to be there involved because it's only them handling. And if they are away from the person that they need to caregive, then how can they navigate?
So the discussion itself is a privilege.
Exactly. The discussion is a privilege because, again, because you're articulate, because you can be there, because you're in the database, because you want to be in that space, because you have the luxury to be in that space, you can be in those discussions. But that may not be the same for people who are actually facing the issues.
Ooh, strong point. At this point, I pause the audio and get up and have a think, because this might be the crux of the problem. In advocacy, in public policy, in development, in every well-meaning roundtable conversation, the people who show up to speak are not always the people who are most affected. They are the ones who have the time. They are the ones that have the language. They're the ones who got the invitation. They have the capacity to hold these spaces. And those who are drowning, caregivers, survivors, workers juggling 3 jobs, they are not in the room, not because they don't care, but because they can't afford to be there. The discussion itself becomes a kind of privilege. So the same voices echo again and again. And we start to mistake those echoes for truth.
I think that's where the non-profit space, I think for me at least, being in this space, I'm able to work with people who may not necessarily have that privilege to be in these discussions, but I'm able to work with them. And what we actively do and the programs that we run is really to actively understand the feedback, understand the concerns, understand the demographic we work with, and to tweak what we do accordingly. Because you cannot have a one-size-fits-all model. And I know some people are like, oh, that's so inconvenient. And I'm like, no, inconvenience is needed. Disruption is needed for society to be inclusive. So a bit of context, my second brother is a full-time tutor, and he really is dedicated in the space because I think for him, he becomes less of a tutor and more of a mentor after a while. Technically, his job is that 1-2 hours that he's teaching the kid, and that's it. But he makes that extra effort and point to go out of his way to disrupt his day to ensure that that child that he's working with or the youth that he's working with is really served and at the same time fulfilled and, more importantly, I guess, understood as well. So I guess the little things that people do, they don't realize that it actually makes a lot of impact. I think that's something that I hope that as society, that when we move forward, a little inconvenience is fine. A little disruption in our day-to-day is fine.
A little disruption is needed for progress. It's a simple thought, but a heavy one. So we shift a little now and talk about something we don't talk about enough. The role of women in the patriarchy. Not in the fight against it, but in upholding it. Internalized patriarchy is hard to name and even harder to fight, especially when it comes cloaked in love.
There are some women who have internalized misogyny. I think that for me is always very, it's one hand, it's frustrating because I'm like, why don't you see that's wrong? In simple instances and practices like men should eat first, the women should wait, or maybe the women should cook so that the men can eat. Or even when I go to India, I still see some of like my aunties and stuff covering their faces or not appearing in front of my uncles, like older uncles and stuff like that. Or the idea of like, you shouldn't be near any older male in your family, for instance, and stuff. Don't sit like that. A girl shouldn't be sitting like that. Or you should be wearing like that as a girl, not like this as a girl. The internalized misogyny of thinking that certain things that you do are okay. So that kind of makes me feel like, oh my God, why do you say that I need to wait for a man to eat before I can eat?
And I think in India it gets complicated because it's covered with this layer of love.
Yeah.
This is how you show love.
Exactly. And yeah, exactly. So I guess the internalized misogyny, which results in certain instances that I've also seen where some of these women, they exhibit the behaviors of, I guess they exhibit certain behaviors that they would pass it down to generations. And it really requires the next gen to ideally break the mold. Like Karva Chauth, for instance, the woman fasts for the longevity of her husband's life. And I'm like, okay, where's the husband fasting? What's the husband doing? And stuff like that. And my mom said, no, this is just a woman's thing. So I told my mom, I said, so you can't live long and he can live long? I'm like, no, it shouldn't be that way. Both of you should live long. That's something that also frustrates me, or like certain scenarios where like, it's okay if the man doesn't fast, the woman in his life, like the mother or the wife, can fast on his behalf. And I'm just like, no, that shouldn't be the case. Simple things as having your periods and going to the temple. I think that is something, and I think that's something that I get a lot of flame for. Every time I bring that up as a conversation, I'm just like, for me, something that's religious and spiritual is also something that's natural and nature. And me getting my periods is nature, it's natural. Why am I not allowed to go to the temple just because of my periods? When technically that is nature's work of me being a woman. It's not necessarily that religion is patriarchal. It's the interpretation that's patriarchal in nature. And again, because it's usually men who are in the positions of power in religion. Just yesterday or 2 days back, I saw this case that happened in Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken. And this lady was violated by the male priest. And he was saying that he was touching her and stuff like that. And saying it was because he's giving her blessings and God's work. And for her, she was in a state of trauma and shock. I was so infuriated by it. I always bring this up that in one hand, when you're praying, that you call God mother. When it suddenly comes to actually respecting the women in your life, suddenly you're just being a douche about it. So I'm just like, why the disparity when it comes to religion versus the women in your life? Either you love all or you hate all. Pick a struggle at this point. And I think that is also something that I always say, that men are always so quick to be doing prayers, to be doing this, to be doing that. But when it comes to treating the actual women in their life, they treat them like shit. And I'm just like, that's not cool. Pick a struggle.
The case of the priest in Malaysia who molested a woman inside a temple has layers upon layers of patriarchy painted across it. The priest told her that letting him touch her would be a blessing. Even after groping her, while she was running away, he yelled after her that she was going to have luck this week. And when she refused to lift her kurta, and he kept insisting, she tried to soften the refusal by saying, it's too tight. And then, get this, he scolded her for wearing tight clothes. When she reported it, the police told her not to speak. If you do, they warned, it'll be your fault, you'll be blamed. The temple management wasn't concerned about what happened to her, only about keeping the temple's name clean. And even now, the priest hasn't been arrested. The temple committee was suspended, but not because a woman was violated. The official statement says, this incident has brought a bad name to Hindu temples in Malaysia. The patriarchy was out in full force, not to protect women, but to protect itself. We shift topics. I asked Nisha about being called a feminist.
I used to call myself a feminist. And I realized, wait a minute, I'm not just a feminist, I'm an intersectional feminist, because for me, I'm not a man-hater. I'm not like only one group matters and nobody else matters. For me, the intersectionality comes in the fact that patriarchy affects men, women, and anyone else. You're non-binary, it affects everyone. It doesn't matter what gender you are, it doesn't matter what race you are. It's just that a lot of times the various groups that you're part of, or the various ethnic group or socioeconomic status, the country you're from, all of that plays a role in the way that day-to-day gender equity may affect you. Again, if I compare myself, and I can compare this directly maybe to one of my female cousins in India, I technically have more rights than her because I'm in Singapore. Even though me and her are both women, me and her are both Hindi-speaking, me and her are both Indians, me and her technically come from the same grandparents, but I am more free than she is. And that is something that we should never take for granted, because for me, the saying goes that till every woman is not free, I am not free. And that is something that I strongly believe in as well. So I think, and when I would share stuff like that, they're like, you just relax, you're in Singapore. You're not here to change the world. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. If I can change the world around me, I'm happy with that. If I can help one person, I'm happy with that. And I think there was also instances, and again, a big shout out to my second brother for this. So, there was an instance where, one of like our distant relatives told my brother and said that, oh, she's that kind of feminist, she's a man-hater, like that kind of stuff. He kept trying to push on that. And my brother don't stop right there. He just literally just stopped him and he was like, what she's doing helps people from people like you. And that's the thing, that's again the power of allyship, right? But that's what I always say. If the work that I'm doing is redundant, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. And that's what I want, for this work to be redundant, so that if that work is redundant, it means we're in an equitable stage and scenario. The fact that I still have to speak about things like that in 2025, right now, shows that we have not reached that stage yet. So give me a reason not to speak about it, and I will not speak about it.
Give me a reason not to speak about it. Good line. I might steal that one. As we bring the conversation to a close, I want to come back to the personal, because beneath the advocacy, the policy work, the public work, there's something far more intimate that Nisha is holding. She's holding the stories of women, their pain bodies, the unspeakable things they've whispered in confidence. So I ask her, how does she hold all of this? How do you practice self-care?
Oh, wow. That's a very tough question. I think for me, self-care is really to get my mind to be quiet. My mind's very active the whole day. So I struggle to shut it down. And it shuts down at the wrong timing, because when I need to shut down and because I need to sleep for the next day, it doesn't shut down then. It shuts down much later. So I think for me, one thing that I'm learning is learning how to self-care, because I still do not know what defines as my self-care. Is it going out with my girlfriends? Is it having some quality time with my loved ones? I'm not sure what I entail self-care is. So I think if there's one thing that I'm learning currently is to be kind to myself. A lot of times I do realize that I put myself on pitchfork sometimes. I feel like I'm running towards myself with a pitchfork without realizing that, hey, wait a minute, put the pitchfork down, just go and lie down. And I think that's something that I'm learning, because I can't imagine a world where everything's equitable yet. And that sucks. That really sucks, because I'm like, I do not want that to be a reality for future generations. But unfortunately, looking at how things are, that would probably still be a reality.
Yeah, you're right. It's just so deep.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. All right. This has been really great. My last question I want to ask you is, what would you say to a young girl who's trying to become something, but the world is putting you in your place and putting you in a box? What would you say to that person who's struggling with being confined by this box?
I think one is to really trust yourself and be fearless. Be fearless, be shameless. That's something I strongly believe in. I think a lot of times when we are in that box, you're always fearful of disappointing someone, disappointing yourself, being an embarrassment or anything. And I think that is secondary, because you can make mistakes several times. So long you learn and you grow, that's what matters. So make the mistakes, learn, be fearless, be shameless. It's okay to ask. And that is something that I struggle with. I struggle a lot with asking for help. And I struggle with a lot of sharing with my emotions with the people around me. I always forget to realize that I am surrounded by such amazing people who are always there for me. So be shameless to ask and be fearless and do whatever you want. Do what makes your heart happy, not what makes the people around you happy or what makes the world happy. Do what makes you happy. Because when you're happy, automatically everything somehow works out. And I think that's something I wish if I could tell my 10-year-old self. I think for me, a lot of the shameless asking of things was always be like, okay, can I have some guidance and help in terms of work or something like that? But I may not have done it in an emotional aspect, and I'm still struggling with that. So I think to take that on is a challenge I want to give myself, and to be fearless in doing that. I think that's something that I need to preach to myself as well. Yeah, but be fearless, be shameless, and go for it.
I love that. I think
Yeah.
that's going to be the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's really been a
Yeah,
fabulous,
thank you.
fabulous conversation. Singapore has laws. The punishments are harsh. This is something the Singapore government takes seriously. But the problem is bigger than the system built to contain it. Here are the facts. In Feb 2024, a man was jailed and caned for secretly filming his friends in the shower using a spy pen. In July, a 68-year-old man installed 8 hidden cameras in his flat to film his female tenant. There was one even in the bathroom. In 2025, it continued. A MediaCorp employee was arrested for filming women in the toilet at the company headquarters. A man used a hidden camera disguised as a power bank to record his tenant in the shower. A school vendor was charged for filming female teachers and downloading their private images. A part-time tutor was jailed for secretly recording victims, including a 9-year-old girl and even his own sister. Those Telegram channels, they still exist. Groups with thousands of members asking for explicit photos, now of influencers, schoolgirls, and everyday women. Sure, victims report these crimes, but moderation on these platforms is slow. Police responses often lead nowhere, and even with laws in place and punishments strong, enforcement can't keep up. Despite Singapore's reputation for law and order, a digital black marketplace for women's bodies is operating in plain sight. So where does that leave us? What Nisha keeps coming back to again and again is allyship, bystander allyship, because maybe the only way forward isn't just more punishment, it's prevention. It's teaching boys to respect women. It's holding each other accountable. It's creating a culture that supports the victim instead of blaming her. It's understanding that consent doesn't just exist in the physical world. It exists everywhere. And it's teaching allyship, not just in theory, but in practice. So until we meet next time, maybe this is the question we ask ourselves. In a world where harm can be shared with a click, how do we choose to stand as allies? How do we choose to support women? Thank you for listening to The Brown Box. Do join me next time as I share the story and amplify the voice of another strong, inspiring brown woman.